I love the call at the end of her presentation to solve the problems that bedevil us and to refuse to believe that they cannot be solved. That's actually the same spirit that animates our next recipient, who approaches it from a very different vantage point, from the vantage point of technology and ingenuity and entrepreneurism. When I called Dr. Joseph DeSimone to talk to him about his receipt of the Heinz Award for Technology, the Economy, and Employment, I expected to encounter somebody who was so far along in his success curve in that field that it might be a little difficult for me to understand him and talk with him. And he immediately identified himself as a Pennsylvania guy who knew a lot about the history, not only of the region, but of the Heinz family and about the values of the Heinz family. And we talked about that for a while, and we talked about how those values tie into his own work. He is described as a magician by many people for the work that he's done in his polymer chemistry, in fields such as green chemistry, biomedicine, and 3D printing, all coalescing around an idea of really thinking differently about how we make things. If you think about it, at the very core of that concept is how we make the structure of our society itself. So he takes on big ideas and big issues. It's a delight, and I hope you will join me in welcoming Dr. Joe DeSimone. Thank you.
First of all, it's terrible to go last. And I suffer a little bit from the imposter syndrome, and I try to keep it just below the surface, but I almost broke out in a rash after these presentations. So let me begin. A lot of what we do in society is measured by how we make things. You think about the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, the Polymer Age, and 3D printing has been there recently as a technology, but it's really been relegated to prototyping. It really hasn't impacted how society makes things. And I thought I would let one of our partners, Adidas, walk you through and have them describe what it is we're doing.
When we first started with the idea of Futurecraft, it was to sort of guide us, to set us on a path.
It's a mindset and it's a philosophy to try things.
We're always bringing in new influences, new ideas, new collaborations. 3D printing, for example, was one of these new technologies that really had unlimited possibilities. The initial problem was, okay, can we actually make a running shoe out of 3D printed material that really works and works well?
So when we started thinking about doing 3D printing, we wanted to use liquids, because liquids give you the most flexibility in material design. I think of light as a chisel. Light triggers the solidification of the liquid, but oxygen inhibits it. That allows us to have the object grow.
What's really interesting about this collaboration with carbon is we're seeing a convergence of a completely new manufacturing technology.
We're going to scale it with the best industrial partner in the business.
We're able to deliver tens of thousands and move into hundreds of thousands and into the tens of millions. That's clear in front of us.
We have this amazing opportunity to innovate the printing process, the liquid rising.
And growing in that context can give you new design thoughts you've never had before and new performance capabilities that wouldn't be possible by traditional manufacturing.
This three-dimensional mesh structure, it's a lattice, it's a matrix, it's a web of individual elements. Each one of those little elements is tuned specifically for a purpose.
These lattice structures behave quite differently than anything we've dealt with before. They're much different than foams. Now we have every individual area of the shoe to work with, which is a completely new horizon for us and a new venture.
If you really want to make a shoe that's a size 9, that same shoe for someone who's 180 pounds versus 100 pounds has got to be different.
We can go in within every single cell and engineer that exact cell to do exactly what the consumer needs it to do just for them.
That's fascinating. That's going to change how we create products and certainly how consumers experience products. And I think that's how we see something like Futurecraft 4D playing into the life of an athlete. I would say this is just the very beginning, and it sounds silly and cliche, but who knows, man? I don't know what's next, and that's what's great about going to work every day.
So a little bit of a Westworld ending there. So what this represents is a fundamental change on being able to digitally create things and do it at a speed that's 100 times faster than traditional 3D printing, and now really opens up and competes with traditional manufacturing. The rubber elastomer that Adidas is using is just one piece of it, the ability of making rigid materials that have high impact strength that can be used in all sorts of applications in automotive and medical and consumer electronics. And the opportunity to make complex things. You know, molding and injection molding, where we make a lot of things today, is you create a cavity and you pour molten, or you force molten liquids into it and wait till it solidifies. The tyranny of molding is a challenge on the designs that one can make. And if you just look at an object like this, and made by traditional manufacturing, it often takes multiple parts that need to be assembled. But when complex things can be made and fabricated digitally, the opportunity to lightweight the structures, make things that are lighter and stronger for more fuel-efficient vehicles, to dematerialize parts, to remove mass, to make things more efficient, is now upon us to be able to do this. And it's a fundamental shift on how people make things. The ability to design products on the means of fabrication, on the means of production, as opposed to do prototyping. Prototyping, we now recognize as a way of fabricating an object on a fabrication tool that doesn't allow you to scale it up. And you have to be very careful with what you prototype, because if you can't make it, you've wasted a lot of people's time and energy. So speeding up product design cycles can be quite profound. And so this idea of stop prototyping, start producing, can dramatically increase and make much more efficient product designs, and actually opens up the opportunity for making the manufacturing of products more available to lots of others as well. And so when you think about the profound implications that if you had a digital fabrication technology, I'd like for you to think about, and many of you will remember the mimeograph machine, right? And you go from a mimeograph machine to a digital laser printer. That's in 2 dimensions, right? There's nothing equivalent to that today in 3D. And that's what this brings. Digital has not moved into manufacturing. And all the opportunity for inventory on demand, supply chain. We have tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars tied up in inventory around the world. Companies have big warehouses of inventory. There's often slow-moving inventory. That cash is on the books of these companies. They often have another warehouse of steel-cut tools. We recently had to make parts for some of these, thousands of parts for 1980 Toyota Corollas. Right? The dies and the tools are gone. And how does one fabricate things? And so the ability to now have a digital fabrication tool that can really change commerce and create and think about where things are fabricated, where things are developed, and on-demand inventory. Think about a warehouse in a cloud. If you could replace 1 day of inventory at J&J, it would save $110 million. Huge, profound implications in supply chain. And so we're very excited about these opportunities. And we talk about this in the context of pattern light. And pattern light has really driven another technology, and that's Moore's Law in the microelectronics industry. But that's pattern light in 2 dimensions. And what we're focused on now is using pattern light in 3 dimensions to really open up a new opportunity in 3D fabricated objects that can really transform supply chains and manufacturing. With that, I thank you for this award.